Hello, hello. It's Jacob Hill with GRC Academy. Today I'm here with Mr. Derrich Phillips. Derrich, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for coming on. I know you have a good bit of content on ChatGPT and how folks can use it. So really interested to hear about this. First, if somebody doesn't know somehow, what is ChatGPT and why has it really gone viral?
I'd be surprised if anyone doesn't know what ChatGPT is at this point, but it's possible. Maybe my granddad or someone doesn't know yet. But essentially, a ChatGPT is a large language model, which really what makes the difference, it's artificial intelligence. And we know artificial intelligence has been around a long time, but it hasn't really been accessible or didn't have that ease of use for the common person. I know for me, I didn't really do much with artificial intelligence prior to ChatGPT because I thought it was too complex. I felt that, hey, I need to be a data scientist to understand how to leverage or benefit from artificial intelligence directly. And once ChatGPT came out, that changed the game where it made it accessible to everyone. If you know how to search in Google, you know how to use ChatGPT. And for me, the first time I used it, I remember it was December 2022. I was listening to a podcast and the person on the podcast was just raving about how great ChatGPT was and how they use it to write a article on a really complex topic. And they was like, and just in a matter of seconds, it had something that was really good. So that sparked my interest. And then I went and signed up. Within a couple of minutes, I was looking at a ChatGPT prompt. And first thing I did as a compliance specialist, how to write a information security policy. That was my very first prompt and hit enter. And I was just amazed. Within a couple seconds, it had a quality outline for information security policy. And having been an assessor, I reviewed thousands of policies from suppliers. And now as a consultant, I write a lot of policies for our customers. And I know how much people struggle with creating policies. So if you imagine if you're looking at a blank piece of paper and you need to create a security policy, that's going to be tough. You don't know where to start. You're going to be searching online, trying to find templates. You don't know if those templates are quality or not. So being able to just type in ChatGPT, create a cybersecurity policy, it's going to at least give you that outline. And with those large language models, you continue to prompt it and continue to really try to customize it to your specific needs. You're not done once you hit that first prompt. That first iteration it gives you not finished, but you definitely can continue to build from there versus starting from scratch with a blank sheet of paper. In my eyes, that's an example of how to automate a requirement that you're going to need for cybersecurity compliance. But there's many other ways, but that was the first one I use and one I use very commonly in terms of creating policies and procedures. Also, we talked earlier about the security questionnaires. So if you're trying to navigate through a security questionnaire, you don't even understand what the question is asking for. You can put that in ChatGPT and say, hey, give me more context. Put this in plain English. What does this control mean? And then also, what are some recommended solutions as far as how I can satisfy this control? I look at that as automation. And also, it can get more complex the more advanced you are, where you can use APIs on the back end to automate it even further.
Yeah, that's really a fascinating tool. Let's actually do a demo. And can you share your screen and show us what you would do to actually create a policy and the additional prompts that you would go through?
Okay, so now we're looking at ChatGPT. So your first time using ChatGPT, you arrive at this. And again, like I said, if you know how to use Google, you can use ChatGPT. This is pretty much just the area where you put in your prompt, how you're going to prompt ChatGPT for information. And there's two versions. You have 3.5 and GPT-4. So GPT-4 is a current version. It's more advanced. But for our purposes, 3.5 would be more than enough because it's really faster, especially for demonstration purposes. We'll use 3.5. And then you also see it gives you prompts as far as like ideas, kind of gives you just ideas on how to leverage it. First thing I do when using ChatGPT is I first want to give it context. That's important to give it context. And one thing you can do is say, all right, I want you to assume a role. So imagine like you're talking to a friend or an expert. That's how you can kind of almost humanize ChatGPT. So we're saying, all right, ChatGPT, I want you to assume the role of information security engineer. Then we'll just hit enter. Oh, and the help of our spell chat information security correct, but it understands. Even if you misspell, it understands. So, okay, now, all right, information security engineer, that can give you guidance. So it's letting you know, all right, I understand what role I'm in. Now, at this point, I want to give ChatGPT context about my business. And it's important to understand when we think about privacy. You don't want to give ChatGPT sensitive information about your business, but you can do it high level where it's giving just context. So I'm saying, all right, my company is small, software is a service company. Our employees work remotely on company issued laptops and devices. So that's be the context I give it. So the more context you give it, the better, just because it's going to be more customized to your organization. But again, you do want to be aware of the security, privacy. So now it's just giving me some high level guidance on what I can do from a security standpoint. It's telling me, so really high level, but you see just how fast that happens. Like just in a matter of seconds, you have guidance. So it's telling me about how I should have incident response, data protection, just really some basic security safeguards. And you can see it starts off with policies and training. That really is a starting point for any cybersecurity program, is with policies and training, that governance. All right. Now that it has context, I want to have it create the information security policy. So next I'll say create an outline for a comprehensive information security policy. And voila, we got magic. So now it's creating an outline for what should be included in my information security policy. And just based on its knowledge that it's been trained on, okay, this is what should be included. And I could go a step further. I could say, okay, what should be included in a NIST cybersecurity framework compliant information security policy, or a SOC 2 or a CMMC information security policy. So you can get more granular as you go. Okay, so now it has a context. Now it's giving me an outline. The next prompt I'm going to give it is now create an information security policy based on the outline. So now it's giving me each section and then just some high level bullets that should be included in my information security policy. So it gives me an introduction. Then I can do update. I can say, all right, add a table of contents. So you can just continue to prompt it further and further to give you more additional information that you can leverage. So now, as I prompted it, now it's adding a table of contents. So these are all the sections that's going to be included in that information security policy. Giving me the revision history. If you're going through an audit, they want to see that revision history, make sure that whoever owns that policy is reviewing it. So essentially, once it's all completed, you'll just copy and paste it into your template or Word document. And then this is the setting to copy it and paste into a Word document. Now you have a starting point. You're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. You have something that you can leverage to start your information security policy. And again, just continuing to prompt ChatGPT further or incorporate your specific information into that policy. So, and like I said, as a assessor, or I've reviewed thousands of policies. A lot of them, I would say 75% of them have been garbage. But that's the thing with when you're going through an assessment or audit, it doesn't have to be perfect. A lot of times it's not prescriptive. Even CMMC, it doesn't say how to write your policy. You just have to have the information in there, but how you go about writing it, formatting it, it's not going to be that prescriptive. As an organization, you're deciding how to do it. But what's most important is that with your policies, you want them to be user friendly, because really the audience for that policy is not an assessor or auditor. The audience for that policy is your end users. You want those end users to be able to understand what's in that policy and to clearly be able to follow what's in the policy. So this example is backup and disaster recovery. So really just clear, concise information. Okay, do regular backups. Are we going to have a disaster recovery plan? It doesn't have to be a novel. It needs to be really concise and straightforward, just where they can follow it. And then you will supplement this with maybe a procedure to go into more detailed step-by-step guidance.
Yeah, that's excellent. How about implementation guidance? Have you found that it's useful for that? Let's say, as an example, how to enable multi-factor authentication in Microsoft 365 or something like that. In other words, satisfying that MFA security control.
Absolutely. Great question. So in that example, I will say, give me guidance on how to implement access controls. I need to go with just MFA and then recommend specific solutions. So we see it's automatically telling me, all right, access controls, tell me about identity management, RBAC, then multi-factor authentication, what it is, and then choosing the solution. And see, it's giving me specific solution, Duo, Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, for example. An example of how to configure it. And remember, in response that ChatGPT provides back, you can just continue to probe it further. I can say, all right, give me more details, give me step-by-step guidance. So if you're looking at it from the small vendor standpoint, is trying to navigate cybersecurity compliance, they're trying to complete a questionnaire or prepare for CMMC. If they're starting from scratch, They have no idea what solutions are available for multi-factor authentication. Just this alone, being able to get recommendations for solutions, that saves them time versus just randomly trying to figure out what to use. Yeah, I think it's a great resource. It's not a end all be all. It's not the magic bullet, but it helps. It goes a long way. And as someone that works every day with small businesses that a lot of times they don't have the expertise, any help is very beneficial for them because they don't know where to start. So really, I look at GPT-4, ChatGPT as a good starting point. I always emphasize it's not necessarily going to be the final product, but it can get you at least halfway there.
Right. I agree. It's a very helpful tool. So we've seen what it's good at. What do you think it's not necessarily so good at? What is it bad at?
So as far as how it's trained on a fixed data set. So for ChatGPT, for example, it's trained up to 2021. So anything from that's current, it's not going to have that knowledge. So that's going to be bad with any current events. Although versions that do have access to the internet, like Bard and other ones that have this interface with the search browser, they will have access to information. It's going to be bad if you're not giving it context. So the more I emphasize, if you're just random questions that's really niche to certain compliance requirements, if you don't give it context, then it's not going to be good. That's the biggest areas I've noticed, and we've seen in the news or reports where large language models can hallucinate. So it can sometimes just give you some random response. So that certainly can happen. But I haven't experienced that as much, but more so just not providing the proper context, and it can be off. And it is important to double check in terms of making sure any sources is giving you or making sure that any references that is accurate. Again, you're not taking it as just the final output. You're taking it as, okay, this is my starting point. But before I finalize anything, I do need to verify it because I've received like information from ChatGPT where they're giving like a reference to something and it was inaccurate or information being inaccurate. So that certainly happens, but it's not exclusive to just ChatGPT. Google's giving me bad information or any other resource. So you always have to do your due diligence and confirm that the information you're receiving is accurate.
Right. Yeah. Trust but verify is a good policy, probably across the board.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about risks then. We already talked about the knowledge cutoff of 2021. What are some of the risks of using a tool like this?
The biggest risk I would say is going to be from a privacy standpoint, realizing that the information that you're inputting into those prompts is essentially you're sharing that externally. You're sharing that with OpenAI, who is a company that built ChatGPT. And at that point, you don't have control how they're going to leverage that information. So that probably is the biggest risk from a privacy standpoint. You want to ensure that you're not putting sensitive information into those prompts about your company that you wouldn't want to share externally. Anything that's confidential, sensitive, the context of CMMC, you're definitely not putting any CUI information in those prompts because at that point now the confidentiality is breached. Now someone that doesn't have a need to know in this context, in this example, OpenAI, you don't want to do that. So there are some things you can do from a setting standpoint within ChatGPT. You can change your settings to not remember your conversation. So every time you have a conversation with ChatGPT, this entire thing will be considered a conversation. It will store it for you by default. It'll save it so you can come back and use it again. And that it is a benefit to that because it means anything that I've been put into this conversation, it will remember, and I can just continue prompting without having to go back and provide that context again. But the trade-off for that from a privacy standpoint is it's on the servers for OpenAI. So you want to make sure that you don't have that information stored there. You want to protect the privacy of it. As far as the privacy aids, is there settings that you can change within ChatGPT so that you can control how long it's storing those conversations, for example? Yeah. So if you go into your settings and you see we have the option to clear all chats, that's going to remove the information from OpenAI servers based on whatever their data retention policy is. And then you have the option to delete. You can export your data. And then you can see here, this chat history and training. Save new chats, and you can toggle this off if you don't want to save your chats. So that's just some steps you can take from a privacy standpoint. And then if you're using an enterprise version, like with API, For ChatGPT, they're not going to be storing that enterprise data if you're on that service. But for the free service, you have to actually go in and manually turn off the settings, chat history, and training.
Right. And I think if you disable that, it actually disables the training functionality as well, so that your prompts won't train the model.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So those are just some additional steps, but always the best practice recommended is not to input any sensitive information at all.
Yeah, agree. I mean, whenever you have a new tool, I don't know at this stage if they're in beta or if it's actually production ready, but it's like a bleeding edge tool. It just came out. It seems like several months ago. So, whenever there's a new solution, a new technology, I think establishing governance around that before you use it in your enterprise, in your business is very smart. How would you recommend doing that?
That's a great point. And like I said, you need to have governance as your organization. I believe Samsung is one example where essentially their developers are putting proprietary information to ChatGPT to help them do some debugging. And the reason they were able to do that, there was no governance within that company, no policy saying how are you supposed to use these large language models, what's allowed and what's not allowed. So that is a good starting point for companies now, knowing that, hey, everyone's using it. People in your companies are definitely using it to help them be more efficient at their job and get ideas. So you want to ensure that you have a policy in place, whether you just add a section in your existing information security policy about these large language models and not to put in sensitive information. And to do that, I would also use ChatGPT to give me some guidance on, all right, let's create a policy for using large language models. And then also train your employees. Training is so important on how to properly use these large language models.
Yeah, great points. You can enable multi-factor authentication inside of the tool, but you have to do it. Right now, it doesn't integrate in with your Azure AD. If you're using that as an identity provider, you can't have SSO on this thing yet. So there's a lot that needs to be accounted for from a business perspective. And as you said, what information you can put inside of this as far as rules is so critical. Where can people find you?
Yes. So our website is aspirecyber.com. And also we have a YouTube channel, Aspire Cyber, where there's a lot of content on how to use ChatGPT. I focus primarily on how to use it to navigate CMMC requirements. And those are the primary ways you can find me. Also on LinkedIn as well. Definitely invite you to connect.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. My pleasure. Thanks, Jacob.